Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled Retribution or Terror. And we're going to talk about pacification and control. That's what we're talking about. And when we talk about sheltering in place or terrorizing people into fear so they're frozen and will not initiate action, you're talking about pacification and control. And whatever I learned about pacification control, I learned from William Egan Colby, who became the director of CIA after the botched on purpose, deliberately, Watergate series of burglaries. And William Egan Colby was brought in to take over after Richard Helms had to step down because of his entering into a plea agreement where he agreed that he lied to Congress under oath, which, by the way, that's a felony, but for some reason when you're the CIA director, it's reduced to misdemeanor status. You get a pay raise, and they reassigned Richard Helms to Tehran, Iran, so that he could set up the hostage kidnapping. The hostage crisis, which happened a couple years later. I think that was blueprinted by Richard Helms, who had botched his own Watergate cover-up. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is I have 10 examples of murder that's associated with the military, in case you were thinking I was kidding around when I talk about Operation Gladio or Operation Phoenix, which are terrorism programs and can involve retribution, but don't have to. It's not required. The definition of retribution, just to remind everyone what I'm talking about. Retribution is considered the punishment inflicted upon someone as vengeance for a wrong or criminal act. So it doesn't have to be a criminal act. It can just be, like breaking the code, right? The code of silence, or the code of obedience, or the code of dumping chemtrails over my head when that's a crime against humanity, like that kind of thing. There could be retribution for all the bankers who fund chemtrail dumpings and all the pilots that fly those planes at the point of a bayonet, because I'm pretty sure they're not volunteering for that. I'm sure they're paid extra money to do crimes against humanity. I'm sure there's some kind of financial incentive for doing that, because it's hard for me to get my head around people doing that deliberately on purpose for minimum wage. All right, so again, retribution is the punishment inflicted upon someone as vengeance for a wrong or criminal act. All right. Now, again, I said I have 10 examples of that I want you to hear. 8 of them are associated with the United States Army. 1 is with the United States Air Force. 1 is with the United States Navy. Now, of course, when I say the words United States, please don't take me seriously. I don't believe there's a United States. I don't believe there ever was a United States. I don't believe there's a constitutional government, because there's no constitution. We're under maritime law. We're under World Bank control. We're part of a 12 banking district in North America, and we are part of a bank division, and we are part of a psychops. And we live in the Matrix, as Aaron Valente told us. Okay, so I have 10 examples which actually add up to 19 murders. In other words, there are 19 people who were murdered, plus 1 kitty cat. So you could round it off to an even 20 if you're talking about living creatures. The first one I'm going to name is the Frank Olson being thrown out from the 13th floor of the Statler Hilton Hotel in Manhattan, New York, on November 28th, 1953, following the Thanksgiving holiday. Frank Olson was 43 years old. Okay, he was attempting to resign from duty from the CIA. Technically, he was a captain in the United States Army, working at the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratory. That's acronym USBWL, at Camp Detrick, now known as Fort Detrick, Maryland. He participated in Operation Sea Spray in 1950, where military planes dropped toxic poisons from altitude over San Francisco, over the greater San Francisco Bay Area, including 9 other cities besides San Francisco. We have the same thing going on in 2023 with Operation Chemtrail dumpings, which go on daily and modify the weather and pollute the water. We have that same situation today. Anyway, Frank Olson appears to have wanted to resign from MKUltra, LSD, Sidney Gottlieb programs involving biological warfare creation of devices. Anyway, he was thrown out 13 floors and landed on the sidewalk where he was killed. And he was employed by the United States Army working for the CIA. So that's my first example. Second example, I'm going to run through these because I have a tendency to run long, right? Marianne Busch Leary. She was the wife of Timothy Leary. Now, in case you didn't know, Timothy Leary went to West Point, was a cadet, was an officer cadet at West Point. He left West Point without graduating the West Point Academy on the Hudson River, but he was set to become an officer in the United States Army. He later joined the United States Army during World War II, but not really clear as what his officer status was. He went on then to become an LSD maven and a psilocybin expert and a tune-in, turn-on, drop-out hippie Army man. Anyway, his wife was his first wife. He had many wives. Okay, his first wife was named Marianne Busch. Anyway, she was murder-suicided on October 22nd, 1955, I believe in Oregon. So that was a little shake-up message to Timothy Leary, who was 35 years old. It was his birthday that his wife, Marianne Busch Leary, killed herself, if you believe that. I think she was murdered. Then the next example I'm going to give you is Sharon Tate, who's the daughter of Paul Tate. Remember, under maritime law, when retribution or pacification and control messaging to others is sent out, it's either the operative, the CIA operative, military intelligence operative that gets whacked, or their children. And in this case, Frank Olson had children, he had sons. They weren't whacked, but he was. In the case of Timothy Leary, he was not whacked, but his wife was. In the case of Sharon Tate, her father, Paul Tate's a colonel in the United States Army and is also acting as a hippie in the same exact way that Timothy Leary is acting as a hippie, even though he works for the United States Army. And Colonel Paul Tate is stationed in the Presidio in officer housing. He's a colonel, and he's dressed up with sunglasses and hippie clothes, infiltrated in the Haight-Ashbury Project, which is a CIA operation run parallel with the amphetamines research project, Operation Sea Spray, Operation Midnight Climax, and other People's Temple, Jim Jones, Bill Graham, free concerts, yada, 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 right? Anyway, October 9th, 1969, Sharon Tate gets bayoneted 16 times to death with the M7 NATO bayonet. It's a little message to Paul Tate and his CIA wife, Doris Tate, who's up to her eyeballs in clandestine activities, if you didn't know. So don't fall for the crocodile tears of Doris Tate. She was a beauty pageant, JonBenet Ramsey, pimping out her daughter from age 6 months in Dallas, Texas, a port facility. Then the next day, after Sharon Tate was killed, on Sunday morning, sometime around 7:30 in the morning to 8:30 in the morning, Leno LaBianca and his wife Rosemary were bayoneted to death 51 times, 10 times for Leno and 41 times for his wife Rosemary. That was August 10th, 1969. Leno was a military policeman in the United States Army, was stationed in Germany and in London during World War II and after. He stayed another 2 years after World War II ended. I think he came back home in 1947 to operate his family grocery stores and produce brokerage company known as State Produce Brokers. The next military retribution, pacification, control homicides were Victor Ohta, Dr. Victor Ohta, and his half of his family. That was on October 19th, 1970, in Santa Cruz County in the town of Soquel at 999 North Rodeo Gulch Road below the St. Francis retreat. The Franciscan monk retreat is about a mile up the road, North Rodeo Gulch Road. Victor Ohta lives in a Frank Lloyd Wright custom home with a swimming pool. He drives a maroon-colored Rolls Royce. His wife drives a Lincoln Continental four-door. He runs a ophthalmologist office where you can do cataract surgery. You can also prescribe lenses for glasses. He is a optometrist for Art Linklatter's middle son, Robert Linklater. Had a pair of eyeglasses prescribed by Dr. Victor Ohta, who is a Japanese native born in Livingston, Montana, from immigrant Japanese people who were interned during World War II. And then he goes on to have a Rolls Royce, a Frank Lloyd Wright house, two offices, one in Gilroy, one in Santa Cruz, near the University of California, Santa Cruz. And he's living like a king until he gets shot 3 times, twice in the head. His wife, Virginia, is shot in the head with a .38 caliber pistol. Victor Ohta is 40. Dr. Victor Ohta is 45 years old. His wife, Virginia, is 43 years old. His secretary, Dorothea Coldwater, she's 38 years old. She's shot in the back of the head, thrown in the pool. She's a mother of 2 daughters. Doesn't matter. She's murdered. And his 2 sons, age 12 and 11, are shot in the back of the head, and they're tossed in the pool. Their kitty cat is shot, tossed into the pool. So that's 5 human beings and a kitty cat floating around in the pool. I think 4 of the 5 humans were at the bottom of the pool, at the deep end, and 1 was floating. And when the fire trucks arrived, because the home was felony arsoned down in the same way that Anne Heche's fake car crash happened. In other words, the home was professionally arsoned. After a manifesto was put on the windshield wiper blade of the Rolls Royce, and Dr. Victor Ohta was murdered along with his 2 sons. He had 2 daughters. They were unharmed because they weren't home. Otherwise, they would have been killed. All right, so he was an officer in the United States Air Force, and he's dead as a doornail along with his 2 sons, his wife, and his secretary. Okay, all right, so my next example is the murder of Jim Morrison in Paris, France, allegedly. He is the son of George Morrison, who was a Rear Admiral in the United States Navy, and George Morrison is associated with being responsible for confirming the Bay of Tonkin incident, which resulted in a 10-year war known as Vietnam. This was in 1964. Jim Morrison went to UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, and was a so-called rock star with the Doors. He was killed under mysterious circumstances, drowned in his bathtub or whatever, at age 27 on July 3rd, 1971. Lots of questions surrounding the death of Jim Morrison in Paris, France. But his father was a Rear Admiral in the United States Navy, and I believe he was the youngest Rear Admiral in the history of the Navy, which is by itself a red flag. The next murder I'm going to tell you about is Dan White. He's the alleged killer of George Moscone and Harvey Milk, who's from New York, and Harvey Milk was in the Navy and hardly lived in San Francisco very long. You know, he's being canonized through Sean Penn's movie Milk, but the reality is Dan White is from Long Island, New York, and he's not really from San Francisco, and he was set up there by the clandestine services. Anyway, he was murdered in City Hall, where Nancy Pelosi presides over the weddings of the Getty family. Ivy Getty was married on the staircase just below where Harvey Milk and George Moscone were murdered, allegedly by Dan White, who was with the United States Army, served multiple tours of duty in Vietnam. I think he had 6 or 7 years in the United States Army. He was murder-suicided in his garage on October 21st, 1985 in San Francisco under extremely suspicious circumstances, having evaded felony murder charges due to the Twinkie defense. Then we had, going back to Timothy Leary, who's an alumni of the United States Army, we have Timothy Leary's daughter murder-suicided while in custody of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Susan F. Leary, age 42, she's murder-suicide by a shoelace, if you want to believe that story. On September 6, 1990, Susan Leary, age 42, goes bye-bye. Another message to Timothy Leary. That's similar to Paul Tate, isn't it? And it's similar to Nicole Brown, whose father is known as Lewis Brown, who was Army intelligence, just like Paul Tate was Army intelligence. You do know that Nicole Brown was born in Frankfurt, Germany on May 19, 1959. That is when Paul Tate and Sharon Tate rolled into town. They were stationed in Verona, Italy on a NATO base. And Sharon Tate did a photograph a couple months after Nicole Brown was born, which made Sharon Tate 16 years old in October 1959. That photograph was then approved for the cover of the Stars and Stripes magazine, which Lewis Brown worked for, the Stars and Stripes magazine, in 1960. And there is Sharon Tate appearing, wearing a cowgirl hat, a leotard, cowgirl boots, straddling a surface-to-air rocket that I wish I had. I wish I owned a surface-to-air rocket. But anyway, she's on a surface-to-air missile that reads U.S. Army on it. And there she is. She's 17 years old, but she's 16. In the picture, it depicts her. She's 16 years old. The depiction of her straddling that rocket, she was 16 years old. And there she is on a Lewis Brown Stars and Stripes cover for the United States military. Nicole Brown, as you know, had both of her carotid arteries severed on Bundy Drive on June 12, 1994, at age 35, and she was the daughter of Army intelligence officer Lewis Brown. You should also know that Nicole Brown was next-door neighbors with William Egan Colby's son, Carl Colby. That's the CI director's son, is the next-door neighbor of Nicole Brown. That's a red flag, people. Okay, then my last example is going to be William Egan Colby, the father of Carl Colby. He was murdered at Rock Point, Maryland, in his kitchen halfway through his dinner of steamed clams and steamed corn on April 27, 1996. He's murdered in a Black Ops, Wet Ops team that came in on Zodiac boats with silencers so you wouldn't hear the motors, because nobody drove down that gravel road because you could hear a car coming from a mile away. So they came in by boat, by raft, on the water. Anyway, if you add up all the people that were killed at the Sharon Tate murder scene, which was 5, and the people killed at the Leno LaBianca murder scene, which was 2, and the human beings that were killed at the Victor Ohta home on Soquel on 999 North Rodeo Gulch Road, it's 5. You add all that up, we got 10 incidents. I have 19 dead people, and I got a dead kitty cat. And 8 of those 10 incidents are associated with the United States Army, Army intelligence. One's associated with the United States Air Force. One's associated with the United States Navy. What do you think the probability is that that's a coincidence? All right? Anyway, that's my video for today. Those are all examples of Operation Gladio Phoenix. Now, most of the people on this list were resigning from duty. And so you have to put them down because they're security risks. Frank Olson, age 43, he knows all the secrets about sea spray and whatever biological weapons they're creating at Fort Detrick. So you got to put him down. He wants to quit. Then I don't know what's going on with Timothy Leary and his marriages, but you just know there's a security risk with Marianne, Busch, so she's eliminated. And that keeps Timothy Leary focused on being an LSD maven and going off to Harvard University to run their psilocybin program. Sharon Tate was resigning. So was Abigail Folger. So it appears was Tom Coomer, who doesn't want to be a surveillance barber anymore. Anyway, so that's a security risk. Also keeps Paul Tate focused. And I don't know what was going on with Nicole Brown Simpson. I don't know what she's involved with. I know her neighbor works for the CIA. He's Carl Colby. He's the son of William Colby. William Colby is a huge security risk. He's 76 years old. He's not coming into the office anymore. He's got a much younger, 25-year younger wife who worked for Bankers Trust Company. She's State Department clearance, right? So he's put down. But in terms of people that I know for sure were quitting, Sharon Tate was quitting, Frank Olson was quitting, Leno LaBianca was in the process of purchasing a horse farm in San Diego County, so he's quitting. Those are three people that were quitting of these 10 incidences. The others, I don't know. I can't say if they were quitting or they committed some kind of crime against the community. Remember, the clandestine service is a community of creeps. Thanks for listening. Please hit the like and subscribe. Share my videos. I am Shadow Band. Take care. Bye-bye.